Chef Duane. I teach at the Inland Northwest Culinary Academy at Spokane Community College. I'm also a kidney patient. I was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease a few years ago, and medication didn't really seem to help much. So my medical team, a doctor and a dietitian, recommended that I change my diet and try going plant-based. And by doing that, over a couple of years, I was actually able to get my kidney disease into remission, and which started me on this healthy cooking. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this challenge ever since. So now I want to talk to you about low sodium cooking and how we can actually add flavor to our dishes. But before we do that, I want to actually talk about salt, because that's where our sodium comes from that we usually consume. And our medical professionals recommend that we shouldn't have more than 1 teaspoon of salt per day. And what does that look like? Well, this is 1 teaspoon. And this is how much we should have in 1 day. What most people don't think about is how much sodium is combined in all the foods that we eat. And it's typical for Americans to eat more than a teaspoon of salt per day. So now I want to show you some of the high salt foods that people use also to add flavor, but forget that it's actually hidden in there. So these are some of the typical high sodium foods. Tomato sauce can be really high in sodium. Typical condiments, relish, mayonnaise, ketchup are very high in salt. The other one that's really high, can be high in salt, is barbecue sauce. People don't realize that there's a lot of salt in barbecue sauce. Pickles, because they've been marinated, are going to be high in salt. And soy sauce, I always just think of soy sauce as liquid salt. The other thing is canned beans can be high in salt. If there is a lower sodium canned beans, and then there is also no salt added. If you happen to have beans in your pantry that all have salt in them, what I highly recommend you do is drain the beans, rinse them off, and then reconstitute them in fresh water. So typically, if I'm going to use canned beans that have salt in them, what I like to do is rinse them off, put them in a container, add fresh water, and leave them in the refrigerator overnight. And it can take out up to 20% more of the sodium out of those canned beans. So one of the ways to add flavor without adding salt is to do proper cooking techniques. So if you're going to saute, I want you to make sure that your pan is good and hot, so a little bit of oil so that you can add that flavor. What I want to show you is how to roast vegetables, because this is an incredible way of adding flavor to a lot of different dishes, and it's simple and very easy to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually roast onions, carrots, and cauliflower together. So I'm going to show you here how we prep those. When I cut carrots, I always want to make sure that they're laying on a flat surface so they don't roll and I don't cut myself. And roasting carrots, I find you usually want to cut them very thin, because they're the one vegetable that take the longest to roast. So I'm going to take my cauliflower and I want to break this apart into small little flowerets. And I want to take out this core. So if they're fairly large, I cut them down into 2 or 3 pieces. You can also break them apart. Typically, what a lot of cooks do then will actually pour oil over this. But to keep this healthy, what I do is I like to just put a little bit of oil on my gloves or my hands. And then I just want to massage these vegetables so they all have a slight coating of oil on them. And then you want to make sure that you have them kind of a very thin layer, single layer of vegetables on your pan. You don't want them stacked up too much on top of each other. And then we're going to put these in an oven at 350 degrees for about 40 minutes. And about every 15-20 minutes, I always want to check them and sometimes stir them around so they get an even roasting color, because we want them nice and golden brown. So after about 40 minutes to an hour, it's time to take them out of the oven. And you'll see they're all nice golden brown. I find roasting just any type of vegetables, whatever you have around, is a great way of adding flavor. I typically, in the fall, when we get a lot of fresh vegetables in our region, this is when I roast a ton of different vegetables, and then I bag them up and either freeze them or have them in my refrigerator to cook with, which is a great moment at this point then, because I never know what I'm going to use these vegetables for. So once I have them roasted, then I can take them out of the refrigerator, and based on what type of dish I want to make, I can add different herbs and spices to make it, whether it be a Spanish dish, a Mexican dish, an Asian dish. This is when I always do that different herb and spice combination with my roasted vegetables. So one of the easiest and greatest ways to add flavor without adding salt is to make your own chicken stock. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. We're going to take celery, carrots, and onions and dice those up with some chicken bones, add some water, and you can actually make this in a stock pot as well. So I already have some carrots and onions cut. I'm just going to dice up another onion and some celery. And if you're short on time, you can also buy already pre-cut celery, carrots, and onions. And because we're making this into a stock and we're going to strain this, I've washed this onion, so I'm going to throw in all of these peels as well right into my stock pot. And because, like I said, we're going to actually strain this, you don't have to do a very precise cut. You can make this a pretty rough cut. Now, typically with celery, I do cut off the brown ends and the leaves, because the leaves can be quite bitter, and I don't want my chicken stock to be bitter. I just want it to have that rich chicken flavor. And I try to have about 1 part carrots, 1 part celery, and 2 parts onions. That's kind of the ratio I use when I make my, actually we call this a mirepoix. So I'm going to add this to my pot. And I also kind of watch in the meat department whenever there's a sale on things like, this is chicken wings. Anytime you can find packages of actual just chicken bones. So don't spend a lot of money on the actual chicken, because what you really want is to get a little bit of meat but a lot of the bones, because it's going to actually add flavor to our stock. So now all I'm going to do is add water to this and let this simmer. What I do is I usually add just enough water to cover all the vegetables and the chicken, and then I'm going to let this simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. And you notice we've added no salt to this. So another great way of adding flavor is to do your own salt-free herb blends. So what I want to show you today is how to make a ranch flavoring without adding any salt. So we're going to take dried dill, garlic powder, onion powder, and dried basil, and we're going to mix these together. And this makes a great salt-free ranch base. You can make this into a ranch dip with just adding it to a little bit of mayonnaise. So I have some mayonnaise here I'm going to show you, where we just take about a half a tablespoon and add it to our mayonnaise. And we have a wonderfully rich flavored ranch dip. If I want to make this into a salad dressing, I just take this blend and add it to a little bit of buttermilk. I also keep this in an actual salt shaker So at home, if I'm having a vegetable sandwich or something and I need a little bit more flavor and kick to it, I just sprinkle a little bit of this right onto my sandwich, and I'm not adding any fat and I'm not adding any salt, but I get a lot of great flavor. So now that our chicken stock is done, I'm going to take it off the heat and strain it. What I do, once this chicken stock has cooled down, I actually measure it out into 1 cup or half cup quantities and put them in Ziploc freezer bags, and then I stick them in my freezer. I also label and date it, so because you may forget what's in your freezer. But then I already know when I pull out a frozen block of chicken stock, I know exactly if it's a half cup or a full cup, so that I can use this for when I'm doing stir fries or making soups or sauces. So I was able to show you 3 great ways of adding flavor without adding salt. You can roast your vegetables, or you can make your own homemade chicken stock, which is really flavorful and doesn't cost a lot of money. And I also showed you how to make a salt-free herb blend. This one's ranch. For this recipe and others, check out our website. Thank you for watching Chef Duane in the Kitchen. Stay tuned for some more exciting recipes.